Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. I now move my attention to Niraj Dimel, former chairman of the Sri Lanka Tea Board. Niraj, it's easy to come and talk after relinquishing your duties as the chairman of the Sri Lanka Tea Board and saying the way forward for the tea industry in the country. But I want to reflect a little bit to the past, during your tenure in office. How difficult was your job, handling the tea board? Was it an easy task?
No, it's not as easy as, nowhere near, or basically the same as what the current chairman has been articulating. It's just that back then we didn't have the kind of finances that they have now. We had to depend on a 4 rupee cess, from which tea board got something like 26 or 28%. And with that we had to do the regulatory functions plus the promotions. So you can imagine what kind of promotions the tea board did back then. You can't help
You speak about promotions, Niraj. There's right now a 5.8 billion rupees in the tea promotional fund.
That's right, little over 6 billion.
So what's happening to this money? Is being utilized to uplift Sri Lankan tea?
Some of it. Their participations at the various trade fairs for which selected exporters, exhibition by or fair by fair, are given subsidies by the tea board.
Is that enough? Is that enough?
No, not enough. Totally inadequate. But the big focus is on the global campaign, which should have been launched at least in the year 2012, because this levy commenced in the November of 2010 when Mr. Mahinda Samarasinghe took over the ministry. Because his theory was that, look, there are grossly inadequate funds available for promotions, so let's start a new fund, and that's how the promotion levy came about. Promotions went on. As you know, roughly we would export at back then about 320 million kilos. So you're talking about $1 billion every year, and his target was $50 million US. So that kind of money is there, but because of the bureaucratic buck passing, for the absence of a comma here or a semicolon there, going back and forth from the tea board to the ministry and back, this thing has been stalled all this while.
Now one thing is clear, Niraj, that the government doesn't have money. Will they use this money that has been allocated?
Personally, I thought so, and I still think so, that unless this is spent out now, even tomorrow it can happen again. The same thing that was there, the threat that was there last year, can re-emerge.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Niraj. I'll come back to you in a minute, Anil. Let me talk to Rohan Fernando, former president of the Tea Exporters Association of Sri Lanka. Rohan, this budget that has been allocated to ensure that Ceylon, the logo, the lion logo, is exhibited the world over, has the tea board really been able to promote Ceylon tea the world over? Because when you speak to those in the West, let's talk about the US, when you say, do you want tea of the Ceylon lion logo, they'll be like, no, I just want some tea. Are we doing enough?
No. The question is firm no. The reason being, as quite rightly mentioned by Niraj, we started this collection of funds, I think from early 2011, though we passed it in 2010. And the argument at that time was, I was the president of the vice president of the association. We went for these negotiations to convince our members to contribute this 350 for the promotion marketing fund, that it was going to be handled by the private sector, public sector. And when the gazette was put out, that was thrown out of the window, and it was going to be controlled by the Sri Lanka Tea Board. And then we are still waiting for this miraculous thing to happen, the global campaign to come out and the lion logo to be seen on international television screens, and for people to say, my God, the Sri Lanka Ceylon tea is back. It hasn't happened yet. The filmlets have been done 2 years ago, and now they are waiting further approval through tech committees and various kinds of red tape to cut through. And still,
just 2 weeks ago we saw a gala event in Colombo talking about the 150th anniversary of Sri Lankan tea, and you're saying that you're still awaiting to see the global campaign kick-starting.
The tea party we had nothing to do with the global tea campaign, which was formulated some time back, for which the material is already done. And after 6 years, we are still awaiting that to happen. I think they are now targeting September in Russia to launch the campaign. So we wait in hope. But in the meantime, as he quite rightly said, as you quite correctly asked, government is in need of cash. There is a possibility that this money be taken into balance the budget. It did happen a few years ago, and we went in as a team and we objected, and we managed to safeguard the budget our funds from the budget being utilized. But I don't know, given time, we may lose that battle too.
Thank you very much. Is it a war or a battle, Rohan, that you're talking about?
I think
it's
more war than a battle, as quite right.
I now move my attention to Michael De Souza, Chairman of the Convention Committee of the Colombo Tea Traders Association. Michael, 2 weeks ago we saw a very big event taking place in Colombo, talking about the history of Ceylon tea, so on and so forth. But right now the problem is, what are we doing right now concretely to address the problems at hand? So many issues. You all just mentioned some of them. Are we doing enough to protect the planters? Are we doing enough to protect the exporters? Are we doing enough to protect the tea brokering companies of Sri Lanka? Are we doing enough? And we're talking about the 150th anniversary of the tea industry in Sri Lanka. Nothing concrete has taken place up to now.
Well, first and foremost, the Global Tea Party, which was held on the 6th of July, was an initiative of the Colombo Tea Traders Association and actually carried through by Anil Cook, who raised a digital platform which showed over 57 locations around the world and maybe over 450 different tea parties. So Sri Lanka or Ceylon tea was hugely exposed without very much money being spent. And the money, of course, came from tea board funds, but not...
And many private companies also contributed immensely towards the success of this event.
Scratch in the ocean, as it were, you know, compared to what could be done. But that's a platform that now we can move forward with. And the 5.2 to 3 or 5 billion rupees available, actually the private sector, the tea exporters, the tea traders, and maybe the planters association must get together and take control of that. They need to go to government and say, let us run this campaign for the lion logo. Give that money to us to manage. Because with the bureaucracy of the tea board, it will never happen. As Rohan was saying, 2 years ago they made film clips and still we're waiting for them to go. So if we want to actually uplift the industry, we need to go market the product. Now when you market the product, you only got 290 million kilos to market. It's already sold. Every pound is sold every year. So hence the need for liberalization. And that's my point I was trying to make just before the break. You don't open the floodgates and bring another 200 million. You go step by step, 5%, 10%, 15%. See if it affects production, affects the producer, affects the small farmer. If it does, you hold back. If it's working, which I am confident it would do, you go forward. And then that money that's there in the kitty can be used to market Ceylon. There isn't a Ceylon tea brand which is worth $100 million today after 150 years. You look at the brands around the world, right? Where is the Ceylon tea brand to compete? When we are 6% of production, we're 2/5 of Be All as a brand individually, or even Ceylon tea. So we really need to move. And
does
really
the government
regulation
have
must
focus,
go.
Michael? Does the government have focus? Let's talk about the activities of the ministry itself.
The minister fortunately has saved this money. If not for the current minister, we'd have lost it to the finance ministry. He stood firm and held the money from being taken over by government. But he needs to now help us by moving to liberalize the use of that money. And maybe we will, with people like Rohan at the forefront and Anil at the forefront, and maybe Anil can talk a bit more about the global party than I can. We need to really get hold of those funds into our hands to use them.
Thank you very much, Michael De Souza, Chairman of the Convention Committee of the Colombo Tea Traders Association. I now move my attention to Anil Cook, CEO of the Asia Sierra Commodities PLC organization. Anil, July 6th was a very important day in the Sri Lankan tea calendar. There was a global event, people were talking about it, many private companies contributed. I saw some footage from New Zealand coming through, again pitched in by a big player in the tea market in Sri Lanka and overseas. We have all this. It's all well and good. where we have an event, we are celebrating 150 years. What's going to happen to the 151st year? What are we doing right now, Anil? We're talking about this year, it's all well and good. What's going to happen next year? What's going to happen the year after? What's going to happen 20 years from now? Where are we standing?
Very interesting. The fact is that what the CTTA tried to do was work within the constraints of what environment is compelled to exist in. And we leveraged simple investment, reasonable funds, they earn from the interest, earned from the capitals accumulated all this time. We said we are going to try and create some enhanced activity that would focus on Ceylon tea. So we have to do that. We are leveraging these events, we're having conventions and others. That activity must go on. Yes, when the culprit is swept out of the room and so on and so forth, we have to get up in the morning. In fact, we're having this conversation that we should really, and I'm a champion of that, invite a bunch of people, say 35 to 45 years old, put them together and say, you're the guys with the 20-year horizon, what do you want? Let all of us, if they want our opinion, be on the side and come up with a working plan for people who actually have a 20, 30-year horizon for their careers, for their futures, and the way forward. And I think that would probably be a great thing that the CTTA could do, and we probably might consider once these key events. But we have this opportunity of refocusing attention on Ceylon tea without, since we can't do the global campaign, and with a simple digital campaign we were able to master this kind of effectiveness. So we have to exploit this the opportunity. But yes, we definitely, absolutely, definitely need to have a way forward plan for ourselves. Within the next 6 months, we should sit down and...
So you're saying that we need to sit down and think of way forward plan in the next 6 months. So are you trying to say, Anil, that we don't have a plan?
Yes. Sadly, there isn't one. One good thing was some years ago, an initiative of the CTTA, the Competitiveness Initiative, brought together the key stakeholders. And we do work together, but nationally we need a plan. We need a plan as a matter of urgency.
Thank you very much, Anil. I now move my attention to Roshan Rajdure, who've been silent for some time now. Roshan, yes. I'm not going to talk about the 150th anniversary of the tea industry in Sri Lanka. I'm talking about something much more grave. Skilled worker deficit resulting in low levels of productivity in the estate sector of Sri Lanka. Those days when you go to the hill country, you'll see people wearing their usual attire, gear, and plucking the tea buds and the tea leaves in the up country. Now, a drastic drop. How do you cope up?
Actually, at the time of privatization in 1992, we had close to 327,000 workers. Today, we have about 160,000 workers. But we have still continued to maintain the production levels as of those times. Now the issue for worker migration is manifold because of enhanced educational facilities and access to other job markets in and around the plantation areas, and particularly with the rapid development that is taking place in the cities, people are naturally attracted to at least higher paying cash jobs. Although if you take the total package, plantation workers still get a good package. And I, of course, in my conversation with the people, I feel that this plantation worker tag is a great barrier to their social upward mobility. So we need to change. That's why we are advocating an entrepreneur, or revenue sharing, or land, at least theoretically land owning labor model, so that they also become part of the landscape and not be working for a daily wage for somebody else. So I am very confident once we roll out the revenue share model that there will be a resurgence in the plantation industry who would not want to work from home in such salubrious climate. So it's just that tag plantation worker is a thing that is not incentivizing them to get stuck in a plantation work. And I'm pretty confident that once we execute this plan, people who are working and roughing it out in Colombo will definitely come back to their states, work on their own free time, be their own masters. Right? They are their own masters and work like the smallholders.
Companies doing enough, Roshan, because we speak about the deteriorating tea bushes in many parts of the country. People don't want to replant because of this. It happens at a rate of 2%, and it's very minimal. Right. And they're talking about 150 anniversary, 150-year-old industry, and not thinking ahead. Do you all at least have a plan for the future?
Yeah, we do have a plan.
What's
because
the plan?
At the time of privatization,
let's talk about 2017 and now.
Give a comparison and show you the trajectory.
Okay.
When we took over 25 years back, we had only 20% of our existing land in clone tea, but today we have 55%. So we have planted adequately. The issue is, when you plant a new clearing, you must have adequate workers to harvest it every 5 to 6 days. Otherwise, the whole investment is gone waste.
So now, okay, Roshan, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that you need to have ample amount of people to do the reharvesting. Am I correct?
Yes.
Replanting.
Yes.
And now you're saying that you want to go for a revenue sharing model.
Yes.
And that is not yet on the cards.
It will be soon.
It will be soon, but not yet.
Yes.
We're talking about the future. Now tell me, how is this connecting? Now you have a plan to do the replanting and you need ample amount of people. And then you're talking about and thinking about a revenue sharing model. And you never know whether it's going to be okay or whether you'll get the green light, yes or no. Contradictory reviews coming into play. Now my question is very simple. What is the future?
The future is that I believe we have adequate, at least a plant stock for the moment to start this revenue share model. Because the Prime Minister, the government officials, even the unions have accepted the fact that we just can't go on in the old model.
When is it coming into play? Is it like the weedicide ban that has been imposed and then lifted like by the government?
I'm bold to say that if we do not change at this juncture, our days are numbered. But if we do change, the industry is going to have a good time. The workers involved in the industry will definitely benefit. We have done this model in smaller scale in the current setup. It's not that this is a completely new model. We have experimented, we have done it ourselves and seen the benefits. The workers' income more than doubled. The quality increases, their production increases, and estates have been able to turn around. Whereas earlier, when we did the model, estates were making losses, but because of this model, the estates have turned around. So the workers know it, the unions know it, and we know it. We only want the support to execute this on the ground.
Thank you very much, Roshan Raj, the very former chairman of the Plant Association of Ceylon. I open the floor for questions. Faz, can I start off with you?
Yeah, actually, could I ask Mr. Roshan, it seems from what I've been listening to that you'll have almost sort of given up hope on increasing this production from the 300 odd million kilos that you have. But honestly, isn't there anything that you can do to get it up?
Really, we have not given up hope. What I was telling is that given the current circumstances and the realities, we have to take stock and see how we can best maximize what we have now. Because in the plantation sector today, 75% of the crop comes from the smallholders. So you cannot simply compare the RPC sector and the smallholder because the dynamics are so different. When I look at our sector, we have a plan and we have a commitment, and now we have been talking to the major unions, as I mentioned, to the government and other stakeholders, and shown them the benefits of this scheme. Of course, there will be little discussions and negotiations and bargaining about the nuts and bolts of this operation.
But how much are the big companies reinvesting in new bushes and
well,
so on?
as I told earlier, at the time that when we took over, we had only 20% VP, we had taken it up to 55% now. We are not only doing tea. If you look around, we have reinvested in rubber. We have completely replanted one full cycle, right? And we have replanted, we have gone into oil palm, export agriculture crops and other crops. So we are not, plantation companies in their portfolio have many other crops. Fuel wood, for example. Now we have 20,000 hectares of fuel wood. Most of them we took a loan from the ADB and planted in order to reduce the dependency on fuel. but unfortunately because of bureaucracy we can't harvest it now. So those
are
we're
shifting the focus away from the tea, from this brilliant brand that we have, Ceylon tea.
Well, not really, because over 150 years the natural attrition has taken place because of our profile in the upcountry. Mainly plantation companies have their estates upcountry because of the rainfall and other factors.
So what are the other countries doing to get their production up that we can't?
Well, there is a thinking that other countries' yield is far ahead of Sri Lanka. The fact is that Kenyan national yield is around 2044 kilos, national yield. There may be estates, individual estates getting more. The Indian national yield is 2016 and Sri Lankan national yield is about 1755, right, mainly driven by the smallholders. And all those countries, as I told you again, you cannot compare because the economies of scale. Now, as mentioned earlier, in Kenya, if you take one large estate of 3,000 hectares, there will be one factory, one manager, one office, one. But in Sri Lanka, because of historical reasons, because they were proprietary estates, 150 hectares, 200 hectares, we have about 15 units. So 15 factories, 15 officers, 15 managers. So there are practical realities on the ground that we have to contend with. And it's not one contiguous block. We have one division here, go through a town or village 5-6 kilometers to go to a factory. So these are all adding to our cost. And now we have I believe in the tea economy is the most beneficial welfare package to our workers. In fact, we have delegations from other countries visiting Sri Lanka to see.
But do you agree, Roshan, that the tea extent in Sri Lanka has rapidly dropped over the years?
Of course, yes.
So Kenya, Indonesia and India, they've increased over the years.
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Not Indonesia.
But now this is a threat. Anil, isn't it a threat to Sri Lanka?
Of course. If you take production increase, Chinese production in the last 5 years increased by more than 300 million kilograms. Increased by more than 300 million kilograms. That is in excess of total national production. So the world is moving on.
I want to clarify that. Now there's a feeling that everybody else is increasing production, other tea economies things are normal, but no, even in India and even in Kenya, people are moving away from tea. I mean, Kenyans have a problem, people are moving from tea to horticulture and other crops. India, they have the same problem we have, because no one wants to continue being a worker. That's a reality. So everybody wants to educate themselves, get out of this agricultural sector. So all the countries have the same problem, but we have different solutions. We have one is a employment model, other one is we are going for partial low-level mechanization. Because of our terrain and plant stock, we can't do machines. Now in Kenya, you can put a machine and get 400 kilos output for a team of 2 people. India, you can put a shear and get 60-70 kilos output. So there are soil, climate, lot of differences. Benefits are there, disadvantages are there. So we are unique in Sri Lanka because of our small size. There's a lot of variations. So I believe that we have to exploit that situation.
Ron, a lot of problems. It's amazing to see what Roshan is saying, what Anil is saying, what Niraj is saying, what Michael is saying. They speak about the oil crisis, they talk about the ruble crashing. And we are the only country who takes a reactive approach. We wait until it happens and then cry over it. Why? Every single time. This happens to all exports. Let's talk about coconut, let's talk about rubber.
No, I think
all major exports.
I think the problem is primarily the plantation sectors are governed by so much of regulation and the protection from the government. So therefore they have a safety net, especially the smallholders. Now after 150 years, if you are continuing in this model that people don't want it to be changed, then they should be better off after 150 years, and they should be at least self-sufficient in their the profession, in the agricultural processes. But I don't think we have reached that far. So that is why I feel they must remove this safety net and let them compete in the open market for tea, for anything. So then you will find the best models coming out. I think there is a lot of potential. We were all these time we were talking about the negatives. If I take the positives, the way the exporters see, there are so many things that you can do with tea. And political interference. There are so much of beverage-based products that we can do. So I think there are 3 companies that have already started manufacturing instant teas, tea extracts. So these are the models that we have to think and the government has to recognize and give, the support for these models to come up. And then again, there are a lot of companies who are going out of Sri Lanka and setting up operation. So you have the local globals coming up, the global companies setting up in other countries, originating from Sri Lanka.
Is it lucrative to do business overseas? Let's take
yes,
a look
sir.
at
If you go to a country,
Dubai, for an example, is it
Dubai? There are no restrictions.
Feasible for us to do business?
It is very much possible. Not only Dubai. You have
How is the cost?
Cost is comparative. Cost is always comparative for the simple reason your inputs are not expensive, and your operational format of controls, restrictions are barely minimum.
Do you think there is a threat of Sri Lankan export companies
the cost of money is
setting
cheap.
up operations there?
A lot of companies are looking at it, and already I think there are about 5 or 10 companies who are operating in outside Sri Lanka, and they are looking at expansion. Already there are about 3 or 4 companies operating in Dubai, they are operating in Russia, they are operating in Oman, there are so many people, they are operating in US, and it is happening. I think it's good for the tea industry because the
classic example, Unilever had 50 tea bag machines back in the 1990s in Colombo, and shipped over 5 million kilos of tea bags from here. They are now all in Jebel Ali in Dubai. There isn't a tea bag machine here. Whatever tea bags they pack under contract packing with someone here. That's just one example. Ahmed Tea, who was packing through 4 or 5 exporters, large quantities, moved out to Dubai so that they could multi-source and make use of the opportunities from there. Classic example. And they are, of course, donated a hospital, a cancer hospital in Maharagama, because they grew their business from Ceylon. So in thanks to Ceylon, they gave us a cancer hospital.
Yes, sir.
No, talking of reactive management, I think to a certain degree I can give one example. I think Sri Lanka is the most globally certified tea industry in the world. All our factories about 10 or 15 years ago, we took the decision to certify ourselves in Rainforest Alliance, FSC, ETP, Global Gap, you name it. I'm talking of the corporate sector. Our 300 factories have more than 700 global certifications. So that is one example of how we have seen the future and aligned ourselves to the future demand.
But then again, Roshan, the point is, all these 700 certifications, are those needed when exporting tea?
Yes.
Tell me a few countries that need all these 700.
Actually, unfortunately, it has become a requirement, and which is a huge burden to us, because the cost of implementing those policies and
isn't
structures.
This a niche in the world? Isn't this a niche market that require all these regulations?
Well, as a producer, that is a requirement on our part, because tea is a beverage and the consumer and the customer expects that. I feel that the marketers must take that and leverage that to the global market.
I have a question for you, Roshan.
Yes.
Now you say that we have the certification and so on and so forth. I know a few exporters in Sri Lanka who have faced this problem, obtaining the certification needed to export tea to Iran, the GMP certification. And most often than not, when samples are sent to the Sri Lanka Tea Board, these samples are rejected, saying the tea is of low quality. So where are these standards now that you're talking about?
Well, I really can't comment on that. The exporters are here.
Yes.
There is a,
but you're representing the plant
process.
Planters.
The brokers, the buyers, they go through our samples and take it. And on the other side, particularly countries, particularly Japan, Germany, EU countries, America, they are very, very cautious, and they are very strict about the MRLs and other requirements.
Let's talk about Saudi for an example, Anil.
Just about the standards, I can see it. There is a visible price difference for teas that come with assurances of quality that are recognizable by importing countries. So if they are paying a premium, they would expect them.
Okay, I want to stop you there. Rohan Fernando, you also have a private company under your belt. Is these certifications all needed?
Not all. I think for us the most important thing is our brand. We piggyback on the brand strength more than the certification. Certifications are good. It is not bad. But
is that adding value to the brand?
It is adding value in terms of giving a cleaner product. But it is not the only thing that we require in our marketing.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second there. I'm going to move to Michael now. Michael, Saudi is a market, since of late, needs a lot of certification and lab tests done on the tea that are exported, the CTC that are exported. And many countries face this problem. Most of the containers that went from the Colombo port to the Saudi market were destroyed by the Saudi authorities, saying it is not conforming to the lab tests in their country. There was a certain amount of certification needed. Now, what is the role played by the Tea Trade Association, Export Association, the Plant Association, the brokering companies in Sri Lanka to ensure that we get the tea right? Having 700 odd certification is not just sufficient. It has to be practically put into place. How is it done?
Well, the first and foremost check is obviously at the point of cataloguing a tea. When a tea goes into the catalogue of any given broker, the broker should be sure that the tea is acceptable for sale and will meet the standards of any market, because they can't be sure who the buyer will be. But at the same time, the broker doesn't have the capacity to lab test every tea. So the point is, there are too many factories, too many people making teas which are below standard, and you can't analyze every tea that you buy. You can taste it, and therefore you will know the quality, and you can look at the leaf and you will know whether it fits, but you cannot meet chemical standards which importing countries sometimes impose, as Saudi does, as Iran does, as Egypt does in iron fibers and things like that. So you cannot do that, and Iraq does. So you have to actually get back to basics at plantation level, and that's where the certifications that Roshan is talking about is absolutely essential. They are fine. It's the teas that are not certified, which is 70%, that are not fine.
Actually, Roshan's certification does not include only the product quality. It involves a lot of things, environmental, the process and all that. So it's incumbent on them to have that, because they are catering to a vast market. Certain leading brands in the world require that. So if your product is to be marketable to everybody, some of whom require these certifications, you need to be certified. You don't know who's going to buy your tea. But unless you have that, you are going to lose out that particular segment of demand that you will probably get. So that's the reason why most of the RPCs have gone to that. And it's easier for a regional plantation company, estates, to get themselves certified, because everything is very well structured. But in the smallholder, private factory owner concept, not everybody is organized. There are age-old traditional private factory owners who are doing a fantastic job. In fact, today there are some of the people who are making a lot of money in this current market scenario, because their process is fantastic. They have a good set of smallholders who know the requirements of the smallholder, who know the requirement of the factory owner, and they are doing a marvelous business. But there is also the fly-by-nights who have got in the scene. They are the ones who are causing a lot of problems. So this question you asked actually should be addressed to the tea boards. Unfortunately, there is no one here to why this is happening, because the regulatory aspect is totally handled by the tea board. They've got to be visiting the estates, the factories, to see the hygienic conditions and whatever, because that's the impact that's been reflected from the other end.
Mr. Rajadurai,
yes.
Let's get back to Kenya for a minute. Now we have been losing market share to Kenya in some of our traditional markets. So is it the sheer economies of scale, or do they have a stronger marketing strategy, or what has Kenya done differently?
Okay, I will explain that. It's very simple. I think when the British planting interests foresaw that very soon the estates are going to be nationalized, they went and set up the plantation industry in Kenya. And naturally, earlier the markets and the supply chains that we supported, Sri Lankan tea, was replaced by Kenyan supply lines. Now most of the plantation interest in Kenya are British owned. So earlier when the British ruled us, they had the empire, and there was some sort of a monopoly, and Sri Lankan tea industry did very well in its inception. Maybe from about the 1900s to 1950s, we had a glorious time, because the British made sure that they took Ceylon tea, not Indonesian tea or Chinese tea, and put it in the empire. So they had a virtual monopoly. In the markets, they had a virtual monopoly in the plantations, because it was a highly extractive system, that absolute control, everything was in favor of the planter, and he got the work done, he got the output. So now what happened is, Kenya, see the British consumer, his palate, his drinking habit has changed, he is going for CTC. But up to that time, the British trained them to drink pure Ceylon tea. So that is something that we as producers from Sri Lanka can't change it. I mean, we can make inroads into the market, but their marketing system is I believe that aligned to that kind of a supply chain.
I'd like to just part in
Yeah.
there. The fact of the matter is that Kenyan tea is cheaper than Ceylon tea, and the UK market will buy the cheaper tea. We are not having an unsold pound of tea, which means all the teas that Roshan and the smallholders make is sold for a better price than what the UK is willing to pay. Hence the loss of the UK market, hence the loss of the Pakistan market, hence the loss of the Egypt market, all because they buy cheaper teas from Kenya or South India or Indonesia, because they cannot and will not pay the price for Ceylon tea.
So regaining
why
some...
Kenya is cheaper is their productivity per worker is as much as 3 times that of ours, because their operating system is different. They have very well established smallholder model where each smallholder is assigned to a particular unit, estate, and he is a shareholder of that estate. I know at the end of the year they get a bonus with which they can buy a house or a car. So you can imagine the scale. So that is because of that vested interest they are willing to supply good leaf, and they self-monitor themselves. But our setup is different. And big companies, they have huge estates, economies of scale, high productivity, climate is favorable, the industry is new. Who knows, after 150 years you have to make a sort of a comparison and see.
Mr. D'Souza, now regaining some of the lost market share, it seems like because of a high cost of production, it's preventing.
It's nothing to do with high cost of production.
Yeah,
it's a high cost of tea. The tea price in the auction, per dollar per kilo, Colombo is higher than Kenya, South India, and Indonesia, and we have markets willing to pay that higher price. So the UK, the Egyptians, the Pakistanis, they can't buy our teas. It goes to China now. China is one of our biggest buyers now. It goes to Russia, which is the biggest buyer. It goes to Iran, which is the next biggest buyer. It goes all over the Middle East despite all the wars.
Actually,
so
no market is lost.
UK is not,
because we saw in 2015,
not willing to pay, say, 600 rupees a kilo, when they can buy teas at 500 or 400, 300 rupees a kilo in these other markets. It's as simple as that.
My question
2015,
is,
when the tea prices came down in Colombo, at which time the Kenyan production was had a shortage, their prices went sky high above Colombo. At that time, the so-called lost markets of Pakistan and Egypt were in Sri Lanka. They were buying Colombo as teas in Sri Lanka. So no market is lost. I don't expect that any market is lost.
Is there a difficulty for Ceylon tea brands to get on supermarket?
Standalone, there is a
in
difficulty.
European markets.
Standalone, there is difficulty. Sporadically, you find them, doing well in certain markets, but not across the board. That is the reason why this liberalization comes important. With that, you can expand your scope. But in this case, standalone, how many pure Ceylon tea brands are there, native Sri Lankan brands? Just a handful. And how much are they doing in terms of the total export volume that is sent out from this country? Are they having a standalone pack in a few brands? Yes, we know, but they are all over the place in small quantities. They have not come to the magnitude of some of the leading multinational brands.
Mr. Cook, now if you look at the CTC sector, its increase, is there a threat on the orthodox teas?
One thing about that's positive about the production, the producer sector, and particularly the private factories, we have seen a willingness to invest and take quick decisions. So we have factories now that have expanded their CTC capacity whilst running them as parallel lines with the orthodox long leaf product. So we find that even amongst regional plantation companies in a local hub, they would have one CTC factory where the leaf could move to that unit of production based on the prevailing market. Say the recent past, small leaf teas from the high elevations were selling at a premium because of the shortage. The CTC factories were output was optimized. So it is that kind of flexibility that has kept Sri Lanka responsive to global demand and taking whatever commercial advantage it can have.
Shamir, I have one more question.
Yes, please go ahead.
One of the criticisms about the recent celebrations of 150 years of Ceylon tea is the fact that tea pluckers, the workers, were not part of the celebration. As industry stakeholders, how would you react to this? Was it an oversight? Why were they
Roshan can answer for the workers.
I'll answer for the
that's not
workers.
true.
I think that is not true. From January, we had joint celebrations with them, and I don't want to mention one company which has a large 3 RPCs under their belt. They had a Thanksgiving lunch for 23,000 workers and their kids. I mean, you can't do more than that. We invited them, the managers with them had lunch and celebrated cutting a birthday cake. So I think to a limit we have got them involved in the celebrations, made them aware of what is happening. From January this has been going on. It's not fair to say that nothing has been done. We are always conscious.
May I just a moment,
January
Michael?
with
just finishing with the workers 1 second. These were multiple events, and we've been told that probably the question is addressed at the state, because we are the private sector that made the marketing part of it successful. They have scheduled events. Once the Ceylon tea marketing aspect of the 150 years is settled, they have I've been informed reliably that they will be having competitions and recognition events for not just the workers, the farmers, the smallholder farmers, and other key people who have actually worked, sometimes given their lives to make this industry what it is today. So,
sorry, this question is to all of you. Could you not have used this 150-year celebration to ensure that the lot of the workers in our tea estates is much better than it is now? They live and they continue to live, and they have lived in absolutely deplorable conditions by and large. 1 or 2 companies do a bit more, but
I think that's a very unfair statement to call it deplorable.
No, it's not at all.
Because
have
the
got
workers'
video
conditions
evidence.
have been improved
Leave it to Roshan.
tremendously. I'll leave Roshan to say the rest.
By 12 by 15. Yeah? 12 by 15. They live in little line rooms.
Let me clarify that.
Yeah. Right.
That's a misconception that a lot of people have.
It's not a misconception, but you know.
In the plantation sector, we have 1 million resident population.
Yeah.
Right, out of which only 165,000 are working. Now this housing is a matter that people, when they go, that's something visible, that's seen to the eye. Now when we are privatized in 1992, it was mandatory. There is a provision that we had to let go of the house and the garden that the workers occupied to an organization or body that the state would initiate. So from the first day of privatization, under then late Minister Tondaman, even up to now Minister Digambaram, all those are aligned with the plantation community. There had been a minister responsible for estate worker housing under estate worker housing portfolio itself, and they have been given the responsibility of upgrading the housing stock. Currently, yes, we had line rooms. That is a historical legacy that we carried. We could not change it over years because the housing stock did not increase at the speed the population increased. So currently, out of our workforce, 60% of the people live in individual cottage type houses. There are non-workers. If you go to Nuwara, there are divisions that have only 2 or 3 workers. So they put partitions, sometimes 3 or 4 families live. Yes, if you look at that, then the housing stock has not improved. But I have enough and more statistics about the estate workers' quality of life, health indicators, and the proxies for quality living standards like TV, washing machine, fridges.
Thank you very much, Roshan.
I think
very quickly.
Paid for by
Kenya
themselves.
does not give housing to their estate workers.
I think
Very quickly,
even the
Roshan.
poverty head count in Nuwara district is as equal as a national poverty head count.
Well, no, but I'd like to invite all these gentlemen here.
Unfortunately for us, we can't do that. But
They ought to look at one of the productions that Newsfirst carried out on the plight of the estate workers in the tea industry.
Yes.
It's deplorable.
I think
when all these companies make an awful lot of profit. They make money. You seem to be almost defeatist in your 300 million kilos or whatever it is the production is. But the fact is that by and large these estate workers are almost like the forgotten people in the rest of Sri Lanka.
I completely disagree with that in the sense that I don't have the time to give all the statistics, because our wages are more than the smallholders, even more than the rural sector by about 20%. and our earnings are far more than the mean income of Sri Lanka. Is their spending? We have a problem about how the workers spend their earnings.
Thank you very much. I go in for a short commercial break, but before that, very quickly, Charita, you said one of the allegations leveled at the recent event was the fact that the tea planters, the estate workers, were not involved. However, there was another allegation saying that there was no tea served at this particular event. Did you get a cup of tea?
No, no.
So we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, that's on a very lighter note. We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. We'll talk about the future, the message to the government, and what must we really do to gear up and face the future. All this and more after a short commercial break. Stay connected. Stay with Face the Nation.